mean, there's a reason that we watch the same ones every year. How many of you, like, at some point during the December season, you're like watching the movies that you watch over and over again? Do some of you do that? Yeah. We watch the same ones every year. Actually, to be honest with you, there's something about this where we watch the same Christmas movies over and over and over again. And I love it. And there's something about it that what it does to me and what it does to my heart, it does something specific. And what it does is it moves me into like a specific Christmas space, right? Like, I can see Christmas lights and that's great. But until I watch like a Christmas movie, it doesn't feel like the Christmas season to me. And there's something about watching these movies too. I don't know if you feel this, but when you can watch a Christmas movie, no matter what else is going on, you can just like fully engage with it, right? How many of you can tune out your kids when you're watching a Christmas movie? That's the only time? That's just me? Okay, great. Like they'll come up, we'll drink like hot chocolate and we have our little Grinch glasses and we watch Christmas movies together. And there's something really beautiful and powerful about it. I know you said like It's a Wonderful Life movie. This is a fun one for me, but like there's something about that movie that takes me back to the mid-90s when I saw it for the first time. Do you remember this? Yeah, no, you don't because you weren't there. But for me, I'm like, yeah, it takes you it takes you back to that moment when you experienced it or you saw it or you saw those kinds of things. And there's something about this, and this is where we're going to kind of start today. There's something about certain experiences. There's something about Christmas that does this, that it kind of takes like the time that we're spending doing something, and it's in a weird thing where it kind of like morphs it into a whole other thing. Like there's something about December, I don't know if you ever felt this, where it feels really, really long and really, really short at the exact same time. Does anybody ever feel that? Like it feels like it breezes by, and at the same time, it's like, I can't wait for it to get here, when you're a kid. There's something about our perception of time where we can do that. In fact, when we talk about time, like time's fascinating that way. Time can feel very linear and it can feel very like the next thing, but timing and time is really everything for us. In fact, some of the Christmas movies that you talked about really only focus on this. And you know this too, like when it comes to expanding times, there's something about our experience where there's parts of time that don't feel as linear as others, right? I laugh. I had a moment recently where I had like a dad reflex where like dads turn into Spider-Man for about 11 seconds. Have you ever had one of these? And I went to, Henry was, Oliver. Oliver was standing on the coffee table because I'm a great parent. And and he like tripped. So he starts to fall off of it. And you know this as a dad, there's some gear, and I don't know what it is, where like everything stops, and it really is like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man thing where everything stops for a second and you're like, no, but I can move faster. I don't know what it is. Like, I actually did that. I caught him. But I like stopped. And time, this time just like expanded. And it didn't for anybody else, but for me, it just expanded for the moment for me to be able to catch him. And you know this. You know this? Anybody, come on, be honest. Anybody ever told a really awkward joke and it didn't go well? Anybody? I do this on stage most weeks, so it's great. I can tell you, it's really fun. It's really fun. But you know this, when you feel awkward, come on, you know this, and you're the one who created it, time stands still for a second, right? And there's something about that when no one's laughing, everybody's staring at you, and like 6 seconds feels like 6 hours, and you don't know what to do, and your brain moves into slow motion and fast motion at the same time, right? I have a friend, his name is Miles, and he's a filmmaker, and I love this. He did his first like short film that I saw. It was about a first date, right? And I love this. And it was like a first date that went really well. And some of you know this, like the first date that you went on that went really great. There's something about time where it just feels like it's moldable, like it doesn't exist. Like the night could go forever, and at the same time, it was so fast. I mean, you see like there's this like expansion and sort of like closing of that. Like timing really is everything. And our experience with time and the way that we talk about it tends to be very linear, but our experience with it doesn't feel linear at all. It almost feels like a heartbeat where there's like fast parts and then slow parts and then kind of in the middle, and it is always sort of moldable. But the truth about it is everything revolves around it, right? Everything in your life revolves around time, and we think about it this way. I'm wearing a watch right now that's telling me what time it is. You are counting down how much time we have left in this sermon. There's a little bit of you doing that. There's a little bit of you that goes, hey, like Christmas is X amount of days away. How many of you know how many days away Christmas is? Anybody know off the top of your head? There it is, 15, there it is. That's great. So you kind of know timing is really everything. And what's fascinating about this is when it comes to our lives, we expect God to move in timing. Like we want God to move in certain times, and then we want God to move in the way that we want him to move in certain time. And then we want God to move how we want him to move in certain time frames. And then sometimes it just feels like his timing sucks. Can I just say that? Or the better way to say it is God's timing can feel horrible. Like there's also parts of this when you look at this where it's like, I want things to happen, but when it comes to my spirituality, if God's up there, and you could say it like this, like if you're floating around up there and you're doing what you're doing, sometimes it feels like your version and sense of time doesn't match my version and sense of what time should be. And then when it does match up, sometimes it doesn't seem like what I envisioned it to be, and my perception of what was coming in time doesn't match kind of my vision for what it was. And some of you looked at this and you know this. Some of you have lost a job and you go, that was like the worst timing ever. And there was something about the expanse of time that feels short and long at the same time. Some of you felt this when it comes to like a marriage thing, and you know this too. And this is what's interesting about it. Like, it feels like of all the times that this thing could happen where there's tension, all of a sudden it just exists, and now you don't know what to do with it, and the timing of it feels hard. Some of this comes in good things too. I mean, you know this. Some of you didn't plan on having a baby when you had a baby. You know what I mean? You ever had one of these moments and you're like, woo, hey. You know, there's a little bit of that. That was, you get it. But there's a little bit of like, there's a child. And I had a friend, when his wife told him, he just didn't say anything. He just stared at her for like 3 minutes. And I was like, that's not a great response. And timing for her didn't feel good in that moment. I can tell you that. And you know this, like even the good things, like it can feel like his timing just feels off. And you go like, how does that even work? And sometimes the timing in our spirituality feels like it expands and contracts and does everything in between, and we want it to just feel controllable and predictable and the way that we think it should be. And so what we're going to do for the next few minutes is, I'm going to tell you, if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, what we're going to talk about, you'll get, both understand, and then midway through disagree with me on. And I love that, and you should, because if you don't believe what we believe, you would disagree with me on it. And at the same time, on the back end of this, I hope that what you find is that you wish that what we're going to talk about was true. And if you're a follower of Jesus, what we're going to talk about is we're going to try to give you language around some of the beauty and the pain of what December brings, which is both. Like for most of us, it brings both. And we're going to talk about kind of our relationship to how the New Testament writers experience God in the midst of time. Now, to give you a preface of this, and this is kind of an underlying principle, when we talk about God, what's interesting to me, and we probably don't talk about this enough, is that God sits outside of our perception of time in a lot of ways. And the best view that I've ever had of this, and I know it sounds odd to talk about it in this way, but if you were to take an object or maybe a pencil or something like that, if that was the existence of whatever we think about in terms of time, God, if he sits outside of all of that, can interact with whatever that is at any point in time. You can see it from the beginning, see it from the end. If you sit outside of whatever that is, you can experience it in so many different ways, which means that if God sits outside of time, sometimes he interjects himself into moments, and it's beautiful and crazy and hard and difficult all at the same time. And what's interesting about the Christmas season, the Christmas story, is that there's this view of God who sits outside of time, who then interacts with time in such a unique and powerful way. And in some ways it messes everything up, and then at the same time it makes it beautiful. You get this young girl who shouldn't be pregnant and then is pregnant, and then she's about to be married, and then there's this guy, and he's like, that's not mine. How's this all happening? What? You know, there's a little bit of like, and then there's angels involved, and they're like, how does that supernatural thing start getting involved? And there's a baby, and then there's a king who's threatened with power. You have all these sorts of things that are beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's disruptive. And when God gets involved in whatever this moment is, you see that it's very disruptive, and it's disrupting two different kinds of time or views of time at the same time. How many times am I going to say time in this? And so the writer of this area of the Bible we're going to look at is Paul. And you get this really interesting thing that it's outside of the gospel, that's what we're talking about. But years after some of this, there's a guy named Paul who's writing about kind of what happened. And he's given sort of like a summary of the character and power of God in the midst of the Christmas story. And he's writing them to challenge this group of people to understand what the true nature of Jesus actually is. And writing around this to talk about how disruptive this can be when our expectations don't really match what exists in the world. And so here's what Paul says, and we're gonna dive deep into just one really beautiful verse today. But here's what he says. He says, "But when the set time, this is fun. When the set time had fully come," which is which is kind of fun when you look at this in the original language. It was written in Greek. The original language around this has a word for time that we all think about, and it's kind of the assumption that we usually make when we talk about time. And the word that's used is chronos, right? This is kind of the base sort of root word of all of this. And this is like chronological. Like you get this, right? Chronos is like, yeah, it moves in order. It's what my watch is doing right now. It's what your brain thinks about in terms of weeks and months and years and age and all this kind of stuff. There's the sort of orderly part of this. So when the time had fully come, or this section of time had fully come. But the second word that gets used in the Greek is a word called kairos, which is fascinating because this is the disruptive part. This is the weird part. This is the kind of thinking about time that is outside of the chronological. This is the expanse and the contraction. This is the date night that won't end. This is the moment that moves you and changes you, right? And we talk about it in this way, like chronos is measured in minutes and seconds and time, but this, kairos, is measured in moments that happen to you. And it's a moment in time but it's different than everything else. It's disruptive and it's powerful and it changes things. There's this beautiful quote, I want to read it to you, and it gives a picture of what this looks like in the New Testament in particular, but it says it this way. It says, kairos is the real time. This is the time that I think speaks to our soul. This is the time that goes beyond the seconds and minutes and hours. It's the kairos, it's the real time, it's God's time, sitting outside of the chronological in some ways. That time which breaks through chronos, and I love this, with a shock of joy. That time we do not recognize while we are experiencing it, but only afterwards. And I love this because when you get what Paul is talking about and what he's about to say, is you get the chronos kind of moment of this, and at the same time, you're also getting the fullness of what even Old Testament writers, and they use a different phrase for it, but similar concept where the kairos is also happening at the same sort of junction of the two. That when God gets involved in something, there's an interruption to what is. And when that interruption comes, I'll just tell you, it's good and it's hard and it's beautiful and it's messy and it's painful sometimes and it challenges us. It's usually all of those things oddly wrapped into one when the eternal breaks into the temporal. Now, our response to this, I think, is actually what is fascinating. And this is what I think matters, and this is where we're going to spend kind of our time, is when you experience one of these moments, and it can be good or bad, when you experience this, most of us resist it to some degree, oftentimes even the good things. Like we resist sort of this, I don't know, we try to find ourselves numb to it. We try to distance ourselves from it. We kind of push back because we don't really like disruption a lot. And I can tell you that you don't like disruption because somebody's cut you off before and you made up new words to say to them in the car. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that. You don't like to be disrupted when someone cuts you in line. You don't like to be disrupted when your plans get messed up. You don't like disruption. Most of us don't. But at the same time, because we don't like that, oftentimes we're resisting some of these moments, and we miss some of the moments that are happening along the way. I was vacationing as a kid. We went to the same place every time. And my favorite thing about the vacation, we would do it near the ocean, but it wasn't the ocean. It was one of these guys. Anybody ever been in a lazy river? Yeah. Lazy rivers are my favorite thing. I think they're the coolest thing, and here's why. Because I'm lazy. No, that's not true. Because you can sit on a thing, and you just float, and you don't even have to do anything. Now, usually there's people in the way, and they disrupt my flow, and I get, I just got to kick people. Anyway, so you there's the quote for the sermon. Anyway, so you're moving people around, and you do this. But I'll never forget, I took a friend on vacation, and he was kind of the rowdy friend when I was a kid. And I'll never forget, I wanted to sit on the lazy river on my little raft and my little floaty thing and just float down and relax and just, have my moment at the Patricia Grand Hotel in Myrtle Beach during Biker Week 2, which was fun for a 9-year-old. Anyway, so there was that. And we're floating down the little thing. But all he wanted to do was go the other way. Have you ever met that guy? You just want to slap him, you know what I mean? And what he did, now this is just fun, what he was going to do was he was going to go the opposite way of the lazy river the whole time. Now, you can do that in a lazy river, a little harder to do in the ocean, but you can do that in a lazy river, and I'll just never forget, he decided that he was gonna run against the current as fast as he could, and so I'm just like sitting there, I'm like one step away from a burp, like at 9 years old. I mean, I'm just floating, having my moment, and then all of a sudden, this guy's just like running against the water, and everyone's just looking at him like, oh, you're the idiot. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that. And he finally just tired out, and I'll never forget this. I love it. He tires out, and I watch him just like give way to the current and then just float from there. And I love it. I was like, it's about time. You know what I mean? Like, good. And I thought about this the other day as I was thinking about this talk. I was like, it's exactly me though in most of these moments. Like if there's a disruption in my life, usually the immediate response for me is some version of resistance. Some version of running against something that's already happening and a current that already exists, and I just push hard against it. And at the exact same time, and you know this, there's a resistance to those moments that just finally feels exhausting, Like you talk to people who go through traumatic experiences, and you've seen this, there is the denial sort of piece of this, and sometimes what happens is you see them, and they get to a point where the weight of it, they just kind of give way and let all the emotions come at once. And you know this, and you've seen this with people, and you've experienced it. I've experienced this too, where you just go like, you just finally stop. You finally surrender to whatever the disruption is. You finally surrender to whatever the emotions are, and then it just kind of comes. This is true for many of you when it came to like falling in love or finding the person that you were be with. Some of you resisted that because you know how to be loved, and you just resisted and you resisted and you resisted it. And finally, you allowed yourself to give way to it. And it just was, and it happened, and it was good. Some of you did this in a job. You know this. You spent 15 years, 20 years, 30 years doing something that you knew that you weren't gifted towards or even called to. And then I love it when this happens with people. And they finally realize it, and then they give way to what they were made to do. And it's just, they stop resisting, and all of a sudden, it's just like you fall back, like my 9-year-old friend who was annoying, and you just float. And whatever that sort of wave is, and it doesn't feel like there's no pain, it just feels a little bit effortless within it sometimes. And it changes you. I put it in my notes to say it this way, that there are times where I resist the ease of the moment because sometimes I'm worried about the moments to come. There's a piece of me that sometimes resists these things because I miss what's happening around me because I'm focused on something later on. Now, what I want to do is, for the next couple of minutes, some of you are like, that's me fully. I've experienced this a lot. Some of you, it's like a section of your life. And then some of you, if you're really honest about it, there's a disruption that is happening that you have figured out how to keep at bay to keep yourself safe. And I'll just tell you this, right? If it's a God-ordained disruption, he will allow you to do this for however long he allows you to do this. But at some point, you will give way to it. At some point, if that's what he chooses, you will. And at some point, I'll just tell you this. There is a way where you go, I'm going to stop doing that. And I'm going to stop being afraid of it. Now, the way that this connects to Christmas is this is the Christmas story. This is what it is. There's not 25 sort of themes to it. I mean, I guess you could find them. The theme that threads itself through this, with every character involved, is the God of the universe standing outside of the pencil, getting involved in it. God becoming human. God becoming a child. God becoming a boy. I talk about him as a little baby all the time. This is always fascinating to me. I'm more interested in 7-year-old Jesus because I have a 7-year-old. Like Mary had to go nuts. You know what I mean? A little bit, Like there's a little bit of this where you go, like he was a boy. He was a child. He experienced the fullness of humanity. And God entered into the world. Now don't miss this. And this is the part that I hope we just get. And through the power and the beauty of that, it disrupted everyone involved. Everyone. It disrupted a young girl who was involved. I'd said this earlier. It disrupted the power and political structures of those who were leading. It disrupted shepherds who just standing there doing their thing, and then, whatever. Like there's a little bit of that. It disrupts these wise men who were astrologers looking to the stars. Yeah, it disrupted all of these people and would continue to disrupt all of them over and over and over and over again. In fact, we'll talk about more of this later on. But we get this moment with Mary where she talks about, or you get this like version of her like experiencing this, and the Greek word here is a word called symbolousa. I say this every Christmas like 20 more times. And it's this cyclical, almost infinite thought pattern of going to deeper ways of processing the current reality. And it's what she does. She takes these moments over and over and over again and just continually finds the present and moves forward. And so as Paul is talking about this, he gets back to this sort of word around time, which is the chronos word. It says it like this. He says this. He says, but when the set time had fully come, and you see this, God sent his son, born of a woman. Which again, it's Christmas, and you've heard this 1,000 times, but the startling reality around this is so beautiful. He disrupts this young girl's life by allowing her to become pregnant with the Savior of the world. And then he goes on, he says this, the time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, which is one of those phrases that's easy to pass up when you're casually reading, but born into a world and a structure of being right with God that currently existed that's about to get fully upended. And how does it get upended? To redeem those who are under the law, to redeem those people who are under sort of the weight of the law and what it was, to fully upend that system in a lot of ways and bring the fullness of redemption, a wave of redemption in a way that was different. And then he goes on, he says it this way, that we might receive adoption to sonship, which again, casually reading this, and you know this, is so easy to pass over, but to go, that you were over here, but you're no longer over here. You're a part of this family, and it's disruptive, and it's powerful, and it's beautiful, and it's messy. You can summarize it this way, that God has invited us to bring the fullness of ourselves to experience the fullness of his love. And what he does in a chronological moment is bring sort of a kairos kind of experience into the entirety of the world to upend it and disrupt it. Now, there's this one other area of the Bible that we're going to look at one verse that I want to give you the sort of the kairos version of this that points to it. And then in a second, we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do with it. In Ecclesiastes, you get this almost like, it's not a foretelling of what's going to happen in this moment, but it's sort of a statement of what God does and how he interacts in the world. It says it this way. It says he has made everything, all things beautiful in its time, and he has also set eternity in the human heart. And this version of time that gets talked about gets translated years and years and years later in the Greek, not as the chronological version or set of this, but as the kairos version of this, the disruptive part of this, that he has made everything beautiful in its kairos, or disruption into what is. So I'll tell you how we're going to move through the next couple of weeks as we go into the Christmas season. I'm going to tell you this. Some of you, when you come into Christmas stuff, you find yourself sort of fully into the whole joy thing and the elf thing, elf, and the excitement. Some of you have kids, you have young kids. I get excited to see it through my kids' eyes. Some of you are about to lose your mind when you see Santa Claus out there. That's great. You get the fullness of that. You get the fullness of Christmas. And at the same time, some of you also have the fullness of the other side, which is also grief. That you experience both of those things, that you this year will remember a loss, or you'll experience a loss, or you'll feel the weight of things that you wish that were but are not this year, that maybe they've been in the past years but they're not now. There's pieces of you that will feel all of those kinds of emotions. Some of you wish it were more exciting, but it feels sort of mundane. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, it's not that it's so exciting or anything. I just wish it was. So I'm just watching Hallmark movies to make me feel like it could be something else. I'm like, you just have to watch one. They're all the same. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that, and I know I've seen them all. Anyway, there's a little bit of that. So some of you want to feel something and you don't. And that's okay too. But when you look at these passages, when you look at the Christmas stories we're going to look at over the next few weeks, here's what I'm hoping that happens in your heart, is that most of us have figured out a really good way of keeping at bay these moments that feel like disruptions with God. And most of us, especially me, probably more me than anybody in this room, has figured out a way to be worried about things that are coming in the chronological time as if I could control it anyway. And also at the same time, sort of longing for these kairos kind of moments of disruption and beauty, and at the same time going, but only on my terms, you know? And over the course of the next 15 days between now and Christmas, but for many of us, the rest of the month, what I would say to you is that one of the most spiritual practices that you could have is to look at these moments that are coming and to be fully present in whatever moment comes. And for some of you, it's saying, I'm going to be open to the disruption of joy that's coming. And it's been a long time since you felt like real wonder, just unfiltered joy. Like the last time that you laughed so hard that you had to cough at the end of it, you know? Like that kind of joy, you don't remember that? You don't remember the last time you did that? You don't remember the last time that you felt the kind of joy where you got emotional at the end of it because you're not even sure where it came from? You know, what is that? Some of you don't remember the last time that you really grieved something. You don't remember the last time that you allowed yourself to actually feel sad. And you're good at numbing it. You don't remember the last time that you just let yourself feel the weight of something because you've kept it at bay. Some of you don't remember the last time, and come on, some of you are parents and you know this. You don't remember the last time that you just listened to your child talk about something. Like you were fully there. And not that you were distracted by your phone, not even that, but that you were so engaged that you were engaged with them fully. You don't remember the last time that you did that. You don't remember the last time, some of you don't, that you allowed yourself to experience hope and faith at the same time. Like not only that there is a God up there who is good most of the time, sometimes in our view, but that the good God could also do something good in his disruption for your life later on. That sometimes you just haven't allowed yourself to think about it. What you've done is you've numbed your faith down to a logical form to the point that it's controllable really by you, which is just you becoming the God of your own world. And you've kept at bay anything that might be beyond you because you don't want to be disappointed by him again. And that's okay. But you don't have to do that. That's you running against the lazy river thing. And you know this, and I know this, we all know this. And at some point, you're just going to get tired. And some of you are tired now. And what I hope that happens today and over the course of the next few weeks is that you just give way to it, whatever those things are. That you find yourself in the floor with your kids, playing with them. That you find yourself praying the kind of prayers that make you feel uncomfortable because if he doesn't answer them, you will be disappointed. That's okay. Pray those kinds of prayers. That you allow yourself to feel pain and grief and that you feel it like a flood. And that you let it pass through you and find the beauty and the power of God in the middle of that grief. And then some of you experience joy. I'm not kidding. I've been praying for you this season. That you laugh so hard that you do something embarrassing. You know what I mean? I want to give you my example. You know what? We're just going to do it. 9 o'clock crowd, you get all this stuff. First time I went to Emily's house, I don't laugh that hard a lot, but we were playing a game and it was all of her sisters. Her brother wasn't even there. It was just me and her sisters. And I laughed so hard, I passed gas in front of our entire family. And it wasn't like a toot, it was like a dear God, you know, like it was like that. And I went, and I'll never forget this. I went, this was fun. And you know, come on, some of you haven't done that because you're a better person than me. When was the last time you laughed so hard that there's snot involved, you know, and there's I'm coughing at the end of it, and you made your real laugh face. Do you know what I'm talking about? Not like you're like, oh, not that, but like a, like whatever that is. I want that for you in this season. I want your kids to tell the kind of stories over the next few weeks that they laugh like that because they experience that kind of joy from you. And I'm going to tell you, when God is involved in your life like this, and we're going to talk about this with the Christmas story, but when he's involved, it's disruptive. And when he's disruptive, it's multiple things at once. And that's okay. Be all of those things with him in it, but just be in it with him because he wants to be in it with you too. So let me pray for us, and then we're going to go approach that Santa Claus as if we're Will Ferrell. It'll be fun. Let me pray. Father, in a room like this, with many people, there's a myriad of things like this. And we thank you for passages like this that it can be easy to miss, but at the same time, give us a picture of what is, which is sometimes even our view of reality is two things happening at once. There's the chronological version of this, but then there's these moments, like these kairos moments that are disruptive and beautiful, and you just do that. And we thank you that you don't just simply sit outside of time, that you decided to be involved. And that you're involved with us, and you're involved in the big moments and the small moments. You're involved in the painful ones and the good ones. And I just pray that you would help us to sense you in it. I pray that the last thing that we find ourselves over the course of the next few weeks is numb, but that we get to be all of those things. And a season that reminds us of family, and a season that reminds us of your power, and a season that is both grief and joy. Father, I pray that you would help us to find you in all of it, and that you would remind us that you've been doing this for thousands of years. The story of Jesus' birth, his death, his resurrection, all moments of disruption, all moments of beauty and pain. And you bring us through those things, but you sit with us in it, and we're grateful.